History of Sultanate Osmania. Osmani, also called Osman Ghazi, born circa 1258, died 1324 or 1326, ruler of a Turkmen principality in northwestern Anatolia, who is regarded as the founder of the Ottoman Turkish state, both the name of the dynasty and the empire that the dynasty established are derived from the Arabic form, Uthman, of his name. Osman was descended from the K branch of the Oghuz Turkmen. His father, Achurul, had established a principality centered at Sogut, with Sogut as their base. Osman and the Muslim frontier warriors, Ghazis, under his command waged a slow and stubborn conflict against the Byzantines, who sought to defend their territories in the hinterland of the Asiatic shore opposite Constantinople, now Istanbul. Osman gradually extended his control over several former Byzantine fortresses, including Yenishaj, which provided the Ottomans with a strong base to lay siege to Bursa, and Nicaea, now Iznik, in northwestern Anatolia. Osman was succeeded by his son Orhan, who captured Bursa on April 6, 1326. Ottoman tradition holds that Osman died just after the capture of Bursa, but some scholars have argued that his death should be placed in 1324, the year of Orhan's accession. Imperialism, state policy, practice, or advocacy of extending power and dominion, especially by direct territorial acquisition or by gaining political and economic control of other areas. Because it always involves the use of power, whether military or economic or some subtler form. Imperialism has often been considered morally reprehensible, and the term is frequently employed in international propaganda to denounce and discredit an opponent's foreign policy. Imperialism in ancient times is clear in the history of China, and in the history of Western Asia and the Mediterranean, an unending succession of empires. The tyrannical empire of the Assyrians was replaced, 6th–4th century BCE, by that of the Persians, in strong contrast to the Assyrian in its liberal treatment of subjected peoples, assuring it long duration. It eventually gave way to the imperialism of Greece when Greek imperialism reached an apex under Alexander the Great, 356 to 323 BCE, a union of the Eastern Mediterranean with Western Asia was achieved. But the cosmopolis, in which all citizens of the world would live harmoniously together in equality, remained a dream of Alexander. It was partially realized when the Romans built their empire from Britain to Egypt. This idea of empire as a unifying force was never again realized after the fall of Rome. The nations arising from the ashes of the Roman Empire in Europe, and in Asia on the common basis of Islamic civilization, see Islamic world, pursued their individual imperialist policies. Imperialism became a divisive force among the peoples of the world. 3 periods in the modern era witnessed the creation of vast empires, primarily colonial. Between the 15th century and the middle of the 18th, England, France, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain built empires in the Americas, India, and the East Indies. For almost a century thereafter, relative calm in empire building reigned as the result of a strong reaction against imperialism. Then the decades between The middle of the 19th century and World War I, 1914–18 were again characterized by intense imperialistic policies. Russia, Italy, Germany, the United States, and Japan were added as newcomers among the imperialistic states, and indirect, especially financial, control became a preferred form of imperialism. For a decade after World War I, the great expectations for a better world inspired by the League of Nations put the problem of imperialism once more in abeyance. Then Japan renewed its empire building with an attack in 1931 upon China. Under the leadership of Japan and the totalitarian states, Italy under the Fascist Party, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union, a new period of imperialism was inaugurated in the 1930s and 40s. In their modern form, arguments about the causes and value of imperialism can be classified into four main groups. The first group contains economic arguments and often turn around the question of whether or not imperialism pays. Those who argue that it does point to the human and material resources and the outlets for goods, investment capital, and surplus population provided by an empire. Their opponents, among them Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and J. Hobson, often assert that imperialism may benefit a small favored group, but never the nation as a whole. Marxist theoreticians interpret imperialism as a late stage of capitalism wherein the national capitalist economy has become monopolistic and is forced to conquer outlets for its overproduction and surplus capital in competition with other capitalist states. This was the view held, for instance, by Vladimir Lenin and N.I. Bukharin, for whom capitalism and imperialism were identical. The weakness in their view is that historical evidence does not support it and that it fails to explain pre-capitalist imperialism and communist imperialism. A second group of arguments relates imperialism to the nature of human beings and human groups, such as the state, such different personalities as Machiavelli, Sir Francis Bacon, and Ludwig Gumplowicz, reasoning on different grounds, nevertheless arrived at similar conclusions, which Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini also endorsed, though not for intellectual reasons. Imperialism for them is part of the natural struggle for survival. Those endowed with superior qualities are destined to rule all others. The third group of arguments has to do with strategy and security. Nations are urged. Proponents of this viewpoint say, to obtain bases, strategic materials, buffer states, natural frontiers, and control of communication lines for reasons of security or to prevent other states from obtaining them. Those who deny the value of imperialism for these purposes point out that security is not thereby achieved. Expansion of a state's control over territories and peoples beyond its borders is likely to lead to friction. Hence insecurity, because the safety zones and spheres of influence of competing nations are bound to overlap sooner or later. Related to the security argument is the argument that nations are inevitably imperialistic in their natural search for power and prestige. The fourth group of arguments is based on moral grounds, sometimes with strong missionary implications. Imperialism is excused as the means of liberating peoples from tyrannical rule or of bringing them the blessings of a superior way of life. Imperialism results from a complex of causes in which, in varying degrees, economic pressures, human aggressiveness and greed, the search for security, the drive for power and prestige, nationalist emotions, humanitarianism, and many other factors are effective. This mixture of motivations makes it difficult to eliminate imperialism, but also easy for states considering themselves potential victims to suspect it in policies not intended to be imperialistic. Some states of the developing world have accused the former colonial powers and other nations of neocolonialism. Their fear is that the granting of aid or the supply of skilled personnel for economic and technical development might be an imperialist guise. Thanks for watching.